Okay, guys. So today we're going to continue working on the reading section. We were looking at the different question types we have in the reading. And we were working on that passage about the Tipacan, right? We did, I'm not sure how many question types we did yesterday, but I remember that the first class we did detailed questions. And then we did accept questions, inference, purpose, and paraphrase, if I'm not mistaken. See. So yes, we did detailed questions first. Then we did accept, inference, purpose, and I think paraphrase was the last thing we did, right? Yes. Okay, guys. So today we're going to continue seeing the other different question types. And we're going to start with reference questions. Do you have any questions before we start? Well, reference questions, you're going to love them because they are very, they don't require much time. And to be honest, I would say they're probably the easiest one for most students. Basically, in order to answer this question type, what you guys need to do and what you guys need to know is what a pronoun and what a noun are, okay? So does anyone here know what a noun is? Do you guys know what a noun is?
Sustantivo.
Exactly. Which means, or can you maybe give me some examples of nouns?
Beautiful.
I'm sorry?
Beautiful.
Beautiful. Oh, that's actually an adjective. Actually, adjectives, words like beautiful, happy, sad, good, bad, those are words that describe nouns. So for example, you can say that you have a beautiful rose, for example. A rose is a noun, and the adjective beautiful is how you're describing the noun, right? You're saying that rose is beautiful. So beautiful is the adjective because it's describing the noun, rose. And basically nouns are names of things. Names of everything. Names of, you could have places, people, objects, animals, plants, ideas, concepts, the name of anything that you guys can think of. You know how we name things in our mind, how we name different objects, not necessarily objects. You can also talk about feelings, ideas, emotions, how you name things in reality. So for example, an example of a noun would be rose. Also, the name Pedro is a noun. Valencia is a noun. Passage is a noun. Text is a noun. Pencil is a noun. I don't know, dog is a noun. All of those names that things receive, those are nouns. And when I say things, I mean everything, right? I don't necessarily mean objects, like material objects. It could be anything. It could be the name of an emotion as well. Maybe the word love is a noun, or the word happiness, sadness. All of those are nouns. Okay, guys? And then pronouns are basically words that replace or take the place of a noun in a sentence. Now, why do we have pronouns? Because sometimes we don't want to repeat the noun. Sometimes it's a little bit redundant if we repeat the nouns and it doesn't sound good, so we use pronouns. For example, we could maybe have a sentence here that says, my father's neighbor bought a couple of roses today. Bought a couple of roses for his wife, let's say, today. And then we can have another sentence, or we can maybe have in the same sentence, and we could say, he bought them so that she, I don't know, so that she is happy. So look at these two sentences. In the first one, we have a lot of nouns. Father is a noun, neighbor is a noun, father's neighbor together is a noun, roses are nouns, wife is another noun. And in the second sentence, we're talking about the same. We're talking about the same people, the same roses. But instead of repeating the nouns, I am using pronouns. So for example, who is he? What does the word he refer to? Who is he in this case?
Father,
My father, you sure?
Father's neighbor.
Exactly. So he is my father's neighbor, right? The one that bought the roses. Now, who or what are them?
The
What
couple of roses.
exactly, the roses, couple of roses. And finally, who is she?
His wife.
Right. So these are pronouns, he, them, she, and the first ones are nouns. And as you can see, the pronouns are replacing or taking the place of the noun, right? So basically, that's how this question is gonna be. They're gonna ask you, like, for example, what does the word them refer to? And you have to say, it refers to roses. That's basically how this question is. Now, obviously, maybe they're gonna try to make it a little bit more complicated. Pronouns are not always subject pronouns, the ones that we know the most, right? I, you, he, she, it, we, you, they. Those are one type of pronouns, but there are more. You have object pronouns, for example, them, it. You have demonstrative pronouns, these, that, those. There are many different types of pronouns, but at the end of the day, this is the idea. Okay, guys? And believe me, even though grammar does help, sometimes we do this naturally. We don't necessarily have to know the grammar in order to answer this question correctly. I guarantee that you guys will be able to answer it just fine. So let's see this with an example so that you see how they are. And Erasmo, could you please read question 5?
the word those in paragraph 2 refers to
Okay, thank you. So I will give you guys a couple of minutes, 1 or 2 minutes to try to figure out this question. This is the word those. Let me know what you think, and then we'll talk about the strategies for this question. Okay, guys, so what would you say the answer in this case is?
The D, Miss. Traits and characteristics.
All right, good. Do you all agree that it's D? Yes. Okay, guys. So the first and probably most important tip that I can give you that will sometimes save you a lot of time is to always think about the characteristics of the pronoun. In this case, our pronoun is the word those, right? That's the pronoun. So I want you guys to think, because these pronouns have certain characteristics. What do I mean by that? For example, if you have the word he as a pronoun, then you know that first of all, the noun has to be a person, right? Because he is used for people. And you know that it has to be only one person. And you know that it has to be a male, right? Because he is referring to a male person. So that is going to tell you something about the noun already, and that can sometimes help you and eliminate a couple of options. So in this case, for example, the word those, is it singular or plural?
It's plural.
Exactly, it's plural. That means that it has to be referring to more than one thing. It cannot be just something singular. So if you guys start looking at the options, you have words like jinpu. This is singular, right? It's singular. So it cannot be a. Then you have the word survival, which again is singular. So it can be C, it can be B, I'm sorry. We could eliminate those options. Then you have natural selection, which again is singular. The only plural option here is option D, right? Because it's talking about traits and characteristics in plural. So obviously the word those has to be referring to traits and characteristics because there's no other choice, right? With the other ones, it wouldn't make sense. So that is the first thing that I will ask you to do. You analyze the word. Is it plural? Is it singular? Is it referring to a person, to a people, to a person, to a group of people? Is it referring to a female person, a male person? And that can sometimes help you eliminate at least a couple of options. And if you still can't find the answer, maybe because you have two plural ones, let's say, you start reading. Now, how do you read? You look for the word. It's always going to be highlighted or underlined, so you don't have to search everywhere. And what you guys need to do is first start by reading the sentence with the word. That means that you should start reading when they say over, and then you should finish here in the period. Capital letters and period. That's the first thing that you will read, the sentence that contains the word. If you don't find the answer there, you read one more sentence before. So that means that you will read the preceding sentence, this one here. If you still don't find the answer, you can read one more back. And that's how you're gonna go back and back as you go. But most of the time you will find the answer either in the same sentence or in the previous one. So you won't have to read that much. And it's gonna be obvious. Like in this case, it says over time. First, we're gonna analyze the nouns, right? The subject of this sentence is traits and characteristics, and that's the noun. Beneficial is an adjective. Over time is the complement, right? Promote is a verb. Survival is a noun, but it's the object. Will be kept in the gene. And also you can look at these things, like for example, these connectors. The word while shows contrast, right? It's like a contrasting word that kind of places a wall in there. So it says beneficial traits and characteristics that promote survival will be kept, while those, we don't know what, that harm survival will be selected against. Look at the opposites, right? Beneficial, harm. Promote survival, harm survival. Kept, selected against. So this has to be traits and characteristics, right? You can always try replacing the options here. You can say, while the gene pool that harms survival, no, right? Because first of all, it wouldn't make sense conjugating. It would have to be the gene pool that harms survival. But it's not like that, right? Because the gene pool is here. While the survival that harms survival doesn't make sense, right? While natural selection that harms survival, it doesn't make sense. While the traits and characteristics that harm survival, yes, that makes sense, right? So you can replace them, you can look for the nouns, or you can analyze also the characteristics of the pronoun, and all of those are things that are going to help you. You guys, is it clear? Do you guys have any questions about this one?
I have a question about vocabulary, Miss. What is the meaning of tenets?
Where is tenets?
One of the core tenets of Darwin's theory, the second sentence. What is the meaning?
One of the core tenets of Darwin's theory is. Okay, I guess to be honest, I'm not sure, but from context, I would say that it's like base. It's one of the core tenets, like the core basis of Darwin's theory. Like the pillars maybe of Darwin's theory, but I am not totally sure. So let's look it up. Tenet definition. So it's a principle or belief, especially one of the main principles of a religion or philosophy. So yes, it's like a theory, right? One of the main theories, one of the core beliefs, the core principles. I guess principle is the closest word.
Okay, thanks, Miss.
Yes. Do you guys have any other questions? Okay, guys, great. So the next one we're going to do is vocabulary questions. Now, vocabulary questions, the thing about them, to be honest, is that they do require vocabulary, as the name suggests. Most of the time, I would say to answer these questions correctly, you need like 90% knowing the word, knowing vocabulary, and 10% doing different strategies. So that's why it's sometimes hard to work on these questions if you guys don't have the necessary vocabulary to answer them. But I will give you guys some tips in case you don't have the vocabulary, in case you don't understand the words. Now, well, aside from that, the first thing that I would like to start by saying is that you should be working on expanding your vocabulary. That's gonna be necessary and that's required for the entire TOEFL test, including sections like reading, listening, speaking, and writing. All of them need academic vocabulary, which is sometimes something that we don't use, right? I don't know what you guys use English for, but for example, most of the time, I think it depends, right? It depends on whether you use it for work, whether you used to use it at school. But academic vocabulary is something that most people don't have, not even native speakers. So that's why even when native speakers take these tests, sometimes it's like Mandarin for them because we don't have that vocabulary and it's normal, but you need to work on that in order to take the test. Now, my tips will be, first of all, learn a few adjectives because from what I've seen personally, most of the vocabulary questions that you have in the reading section are about adjectives. So I would totally try to look for a couple of adjectives, probably like, I don't know, maybe the most common or synonyms for the 30 most common adjectives. Second, study the roots of the word and study suffixes and prefixes. The roots of the word are going to help you expand your vocabulary very quickly. That's a really good option when you guys don't have a lot of time to study vocabulary. And study the most common prefixes and suffixes. For example, the word, let's say, I can't think of a word right now. Let's say the word heartless, right? It's composed of heart and less. Heart is the root of the word. We all know what a heart is. And less is a suffix. And that suffix adds meaning to the word, right? So heartless is somebody that doesn't have a heart, that lacks of a heart. Because that suffix less basically means the lack of something, right? So by studying suffixes, prefixes, and the roots of the words, you're gonna double or triple your vocabulary in a matter of a very short time. So that would be some tips that I can give you. Study adjectives, study the roots of the words, study prefixes, suffixes, and of course, read. Try not to study vocabulary by doing like flashcards or memorizing word lists. Try to study vocabulary by reading and trying to understand words from context. Because that's a technique that you guys need for this test. You need to be able to understand words sometimes from context, not because you know the word, but because you can relate it to the context. So those are some things that I could say. And without further ado, let's start looking at these vocabulary questions. Okay, guys. Luis, please, could you read the question we have here?
The word ingenuity in paragraph 2 is closest in meaning to.
Yes. So without reading, what do you guys think? Does anyone know here the meaning of the word ingenuity? Can you guys associate it to a synonym in these options?
It's cleverness.
Okay. How sure are you that it's cleverness?
I think it's for I don't really know the word, but ambition is not. Sincerity, no. And faith, I know the meaning, so it's no. So I think that is cleverness.
Okay, good, Rosario. Great. So if you guys know the word, if you are sure about it, then what you guys have to do is choose that option, cleverness, and move on to the next question. Please don't waste your time here. Maybe one thing that you could do before moving on to the next question is replacing the option into the text. So for example, the word ingenuity is found here. So you could read the text or like the sentence again with the word in it. And if it makes sense, you move on. You don't have to waste a lot of time in these questions if you know the meaning of the word, right? If you know the word, if you're familiar with it, then please don't waste your time. Now, in case you guys don't know the word, what you guys have to do is try to see it from context, try to relate it to the context of text. How do you do that? By understanding the main idea in the text. And this is similar to purpose questions. You need to always understand the main idea of the text and then try to see how this word contributes to that main idea. So I'll give you guys some seconds and I want you guys to tell me what you think the main idea of this paragraph is. What is this paragraph about? What is this paragraph trying to show, trying to explain, trying to inform? You guys, let me know. So what would you say the meaning, I'm sorry, what would you say the main idea of this paragraph is then? It's to explain and to enlist the factors that influenced or led to the development of Teotihuacan, right? And you guys can find that information in the first sentences. Remember, I told you to always read the first sentences, and that sometimes or most of the time you'll find the main idea there. So in this case, it says, how did this tremendous development take place? And why did it happen in the Teotihuacan Valley? Among the main factors are, and then they start listing the factors. And then they say the exact role of other factors is, and then they start giving other factors. So basically, it's about the different factors that influence the development of Teotihuacan in the Teotihuacan Valley. And once that you understand that main idea, you have to ask yourselves, so how does this word, ingenuity, contribute to that main idea? Like, what is that word doing there? Then you would know that the ingenuity and foresightness of Teotihuacan's elite is actually one of the factors that influence the development of the city. So that is the context. The ingenuity and foresightness of the Teotihuacan's elite was one of the factors that led to the development of the place, the tremendous development of the place. So that can help you sometimes like eliminate a couple of options. For example, I don't think it's very likely that we could say the faith of the elite is what led to the development of the city, right? Because it doesn't make too much sense comparing it to the other factors here. Or like the sincerity of the elite. It doesn't fit that very well, right? The sincerity, the faith of the elite doesn't really fit. However, if you say, for example, the ambition of the elite is what led to the development of the place, or the cleverness of the elite, that makes more sense, to me at least. You know, there are different ways to see this. Now, other thing that you could consider is the ingenuity is not just ingenuity, it's the ingenuity and foresightedness. Does anyone know what foresightedness means? Actually, this is very related to what I was telling you. Remember, I was telling you, study the roots of the words, prefixes and suffixes. Foresightedness is a compound word. It's for, that's a prefix. Then you have sight, which is the root of the word. Then you have het, and finally you have ness. So sight is the root of the word. You have a prefix for, and you have two suffixes, het and ness. So basically, how does this help you? You probably know what sight means, right? Do you guys know what sight means?
Vista, right?
It means vista, right? It comes from the verb see, to see, sight, love at first sight, for example. Now, the prefix for means if it's related to before. So it's also related to the future. For example, the word forecast, the weather forecast, is la predicción del tiempo, no? The weather forecast. You also have words like foreshadowing. It's a technique in books. It's like literary technique, foreshadowing. And there are some words that have this prefix. So if we look it up, I want you guys to see what the meaning of the prefix for is. Basically, it says for is a prefix meaning before in space, time, condition, etc. From to period. Examples: forehead, forecastle, forecast, foretell, foreman. Right? So it means before in space, time, condition. So basically, foresee, the verb foresee, means to see before something happens, to see something before it happens, to predict something, to make a prediction on something. So in the suffixes, ness, that suffix ness basically just tells you that it's a noun. It doesn't really say much. It just says that it's a noun. For example, clever is an adjective. And if you add the suffix, ness, that turns it into a noun. So foresighted has to be an adjective. And if we add the word ness or the suffix ness, that makes it a noun. So foresightedness basically means the ability to see something before it happens or to predict something. Let's look up for the definition. Foresightedness meaning. So, providence by virtue or planning prudently for the future. Okay, let's search for definition. That's a little bit. Okay. In act or the power of foreseeing, right? An act of looking forward. Knowledge or insight gained by us or us by looking forward. A view of the future. That's foresightedness. So basically, they say the ingenuity and foresightedness of Teotihuacan's elite. Foresightedness is related to being smart, right? To being able to take provisions for the future, to see the future, to predict what's going to happen, and to being smart about it. So that can also sometimes help you understand better the options, because the one that is the most related to foresightedness is cleverness, right? Cleverness, somebody that's clever is somebody that's wise, sabio, somebody that's smart, that has ingenuity. And ingenuity basically means ingenio in Spanish, right? It doesn't mean ingenuidad, por si acaso, right? Some people sometimes confuse those words because it ends in, right? So it may appear like it looks like it means that. So obviously, guys, this is not gonna be 100% accurate. These strategies, these tips that I'm giving you are gonna help you eliminate a couple of options, narrow down your choices. But at the end of the day, to be honest with you guys, you won't be able to 100% answer the question correctly with 100% certainty if you guys don't know the words, because it's very hard. But those are some techniques that can help you at least maybe eliminate a couple of options. Or maybe you can think what is the most probable, what is the most likely to be the one, right? ¿Cuál es más probable que sea la respuesta? Aunque no estén 100% seguros. Even though you guys are not 100% sure, you can try to guess which one is the most likely to be the one. You guys? So those are some things that you can do. Okay, but at the end of the day, study vocabulary, that's what I would say. So what do you guys think? What do you all think? Do you have any questions so far?
Miss, is there a chance that the test repeat exactly the same questions, or it's different every time?
Oh no, it's different every time.
Okay, thanks.
I don't know where they get out so many different texts and listenings and material for the speaking section, but I think what happens is they are similar sometimes, but they're not going to be always exactly the same. They're never going to be exactly the same, but they could be similar.
Thanks, Miss.
You guys sure? Any other questions so far? Okay, so we have 2 more questions to go. Our next one is gonna be called insert text type of question. Okay, guys. So remember, oh, here it is. Here's the question. So with these insert text questions, what you guys have to do is they will give you a sentence and they give you 4 different options in 4 different boxes. So for example, option A is here, option B, option C, and option D. And they ask you, where do you think that this sentence would best fit? That means, where do you think this sentence belongs to? Does it belong to space A, space B, space C, or D? So you have these 4 different options where you can place this sentence, and you have to choose the one that you think best fits, right? So let's read the instructions. Maybe, Pamela, can you read the instructions, please? Maybe Alejandro there?
In paragraph 1 of the passage, there is a missing sentence. The paragraph is repeated below and shows 4 letters, A, B, C, and D, that indicate where the following sentence could be added.
Okay, thank you. So what we're gonna do is I'm gonna give you guys well, honestly, this question does require a little bit more time. So the thing is, as I was telling you, not all questions require the exact same time. In average, you should be spending 1.5 minutes in each question. But technically speaking, there are gonna be questions like, for example, vocabulary questions, reference questions, even detailed questions, or paraphrase questions that you can answer faster. You can answer a reference question in 40 seconds. You can answer a vocabulary question in 30 if you know the word. You can answer a detailed question in 1 minute approximately. Now, this question requires a little bit more time. So you could answer it in 2, even 2.5 minutes, and that's it, right? That's the maximum that you can spend. If you're spending more than that, you need to choose one randomly, guess, and move on to the next one. But you can allow yourself to use a little bit more time for these questions, and as long as you use less time for the others, right? Because if you use 2 minutes for each one, you're gonna run out of time. So you need to play with that, and the way that you're gonna realize this, and the way that you're gonna know and become used to it, is by practice. Okay, guys? So I'll give you 2 to 3 minutes to answer this question, and tell me what you think, where you would place that sentence. Okay, guys, so what would you say? Where would you place that sentence?
Option A, Miss.
Okay, option A. Do you all agree that it's option A?
I think it could be the option C.
Option C, okay. Okay, guys, so in order to answer this question, unfortunately, most of the time you would have to read a lot. I mean, I won't lie to you, you have to kind of read everything. So what you guys have to do, first of all, read the original question, or the question that you have to move. In fact, artifacts and pottery from Teotihuacan have been discovered in Paraguay as the Mayan lowlands, the Guatemalan highlands, northern Mexico, and the Gulf Coast of Mexico. Now, one thing that I really like about this question is that most of the time it's the same. What do I mean by that? Like, sentences go together in pairs, and you always have one sentence that has a general idea, and then you have the details or the explanation of that idea. It's always like that. You have a general idea, and then you have the details or the explanation. Always like that. So I will give you guys a couple of tips. The first tip is going to be always identify whether the sentence that you're using or that you have to place is a sentence that explains a general idea or that contains details and explanations. What would you guys say this sentence is? Is it a general idea or are they details?
Give some details.
does give details, right? Because it mentions the specific sites, specific places, the Mayan lowlands, the Guatemalan highlands, northern Mexico, and the Gulf Coast of Mexico. So if you have details in your sentence, that means that there's probably going to be another sentence, and you always have to do this. You have to understand what the sentence talks about. It talks about the fact that things from Teotihuacan, let's generalize, things from Teotihuacan were discovered in places that were far away from Teotihuacan, right? That is basically what this sentence is saying. Things from Teotihuacan were discovered in places that were far away from Teotihuacan. Now, that has to be the explanation or the details of something. So you need to start going over the sentences here, starting here, because you need to read before and after each option. And you need to start looking for another sentence that talks about something similar or the same. So we read this sentence and it talks about population. It talks about population, right? At its high, between AD 150 and 700, it probably had a population of more than 125,000 people. So it talks about population, and it also talks about the size of the city. It's not really related, right? But let's continue reading. Then they talk about the apartment complexes they had, the market they had, the industrial workshops, the administrative centers. So they talk about the different things that the city had. So again, they're talking about the city or the Teotihuacan internally, right? They're talking about all the things that the city had in itself. They're not talking about the borders or the neighboring places. They're not talking about like anything related to places that are not Teotihuacan itself. Then we continue reading and they say, clearly much planning and central control were involved in the expansion and ordering of these great metropolis. So this is kind of there because it's talking about the expansion in a way, but it's not the main idea, right? The main idea here is the planning and the central control that were involved in the expansion and ordering of the city. So we continue reading until we find one that kind of let it clear. Then the next one says, moreover, the city had economic and perhaps religious contacts with most parts of Mesoamerica, modern Central America, and Mexico. Look at this sentence here. It's talking about the contacts that Teotihuacan had with other parts of Mesoamerica, most parts of Mesoamerica. And I would say, the same as this sentence, right? Because it's talking about how Teotihuacan, things from Teotihuacan were found in other places, right? So it looks like that could be the one. It could be close to this sentence. And if you guys think about it, this would be the general idea of this sentence, right? And this is the explanation. So why do we say, or what does the author say, that the Teotihuacan have contacts with these parts of Mesoamerica? Because artifacts and pottery from Teotihuacan have been discovered in these places. How do they know that they had contacts with other parts of Mesoamerica? Because things from Teotihuacan have been discovered in these places, right? It makes sense if we think about it like that. And another thing that you guys are gonna find really useful is use any transitions that they give you. Transitions are key because they show the relationship among ideas. So for example, if you have the word however, that means that you're looking for contrast, that the sentence that you have here needs to be the opposite of the previous sentence. If you have, for example, you know that the sentence here needs to be an example of what you have before. If you have as a result, that means that this should be the effect of the cause that you have before. So in this case, you have the word in fact, or the transition in fact. And in fact is used to explain an idea by giving evidence. And that's exactly what this sentence is doing. It's explaining the idea that Teotihuacan have contacts with most parts of Mesoamerica, right? And it's the evidence or the details of this idea. So it's a continuation of the same idea, therefore it has to be option D, the last one. Okay, guys? So to summarize, what you need to do is understand what the sentence is talking about, go over the options to see if you find a sentence that talks about the same or something similar, And some tips that I can give you is use transition words. Try to see if your sentence is a detailed sentence or it's a general idea. Usually they come in pairs. So you have one general idea and then you have the details. Another general idea and the details. It's usually like that. Okay, guys? So is that okay? Do you have any questions? Do we all see why option D would be the correct choice in this case?
What was you saying, Miss? In fact, it's a word that expresses not contrast. I was thinking that it expresses contrast.
No, in fact, expresses explanations. It's a word or a phrase, sorry, that is used to explain something a little bit more. However, it's the one that expresses contrast. So if we search for the meaning of the transition, in fact, it's like de hecho. So used to emphasize the truth of an assertion, right? But as a transition.
Okay. Okay, thanks, Miss.
Yes. Look at this part. We use in fact to add more detailed information to what has just been said. Right? So that's exactly how we're using it here. We use in fact to add more detailed information about what we just said, or what the author just said. The author said that Teotihuacan had contacts with most parts of Mesoamerica, and then they add more detailed information about that. Right?
Thanks, Miss.
Yes, of course. Do you guys have any other questions? Okay, guys. And finally, if we have some time, we're going to see the last question, which is called summary questions. These summary questions are going to always ask you they give you 6 different options. All right, they give you 6 different options. And what they want is they want you to choose 3 out of those 6 options that you think are the best summaries of the entire passage, the entire text. Okay, so let's see. It's always going to be the last sentence. And basically, they want you to choose 3 options that you believe are the best summaries of everything, of the entire text. So let's see the instructions. It says, an introductory sentence for a brief summary of the passage is provided below. Complete the summary by selecting 3 answer choices that express the most important ideas in the passage. Some sentences don't belong in the summary because they express ideas that are not presented in the passage or are minor ideas in the passage. This question is worth 2 points, so it's worth like 2 of the other questions. So you have 6 options, A, B, C, D, E, and F, and they want you guys to choose 3 of them that you feel express the most important ideas in the passage. There are going to be some options that are not correct because they talk about things that are not true or that are not mentioned, or because they are minor ideas. That means that they are not very important ideas. They may be true, they may be mentioned, but they are not big ideas. They are not major ideas in the text. Okay, guys? So I will give you 3 minutes to try to answer this question. Select 3 of them. I know that you guys, well, you have read, right? But let's try to answer. Give me those 3 options that you think are the most important ideas, and then we'll see. Guys, so what do you think? What would you say the most important ideas are?
The A, C, and E mean?
Okay, let's see. So in this case, the tips that I'm gonna give you are very the first tip that I will give you is please do not waste a lot of time in this question. A lot of times students make the mistake of reading everything again. And I don't know why, but they go back to the text, they read everything again, and then they start looking for the most important. Yes, that's a terrible thing to do, especially if you're running out of time. Remember that you only get 18 minutes per passage, right? So if you guys are near those 18 minutes, let's say that you only have 2 minutes to answer this question because you've already used 16 minutes out of the 18 that you have, please never, under no circumstance, should you use the time that you would have for the next question for this one here or the next passage to answer this question. Don't do that. That's a terrible thing to do. It's not worth it. It's really not. So my suggestion is answer this using the time that you have. You always have one specific, a specific amount of time to answer this question, which is the time that you have left, because it's the last question. And what you guys need to do is look at the options, and I would say start eliminating options aggressively and eliminate the options that are too specific first. So for example, this is a very specific option. It's too specific to be a major idea. Very, I would say, unnecessarily specific. How do I know that it's too specific? Because it's focusing on only one thing. It's focusing on immigrants and population growth. And it's very specific. Look at how they are mentioning the exact time that this happened. They are talking about only one point, one specific point. I don't know if this is true or not. I don't know if this was mentioned in the text or not. I am not going to check. Please don't check. Don't say, okay, let's see if this was mentioned. Don't do that. It's too specific. I will just eliminate this option. But if you guys compare it to, for example, option C, that's a very general, broad question. And it talks about the main idea. What was the main idea in the passage? Teotihuacan's development. That was the main idea, right? Teotihuacan's growth. Even the title says it, the rise of Teotihuacan. It was about the different factors, the different elements or aspects that respond for the development of Teotihuacan. So option C says that. Option C says several factors may account for Teotihuacan's extraordinary development. That is true. They had an extraordinary, a tremendous development, including but not excluding its location, natural resources, irrigation potential, the elite, the misfortune of rival communities. And they talk about all of that from what you remember. You guys should remember that we read about obsidian, we read about irrigation, we read about the elite, we read about the volcanic eruptions that happened later in Cuicuilco. I don't know if you guys remember. So just by having a brief understanding of what the text was about, then you should totally come to the conclusion that C is one of them, for sure. Now, if you start looking at the other options, for example, this one here, Teotihuacan may have developed its own specific local religion as a result of the cultural advances made possible by the city's great prosperity. Like, do they really focus on religion that much? Not really, right? They don't focus on religion. There's not even one paragraph that talks about religion only. Everything was about all different factors. This text wasn't about the Teotihuacan's religion. So this is again too specific to be the one. Same thing happens with D, very specific. It talks about religious rights. It talks about Teotihuacan becoming the most influential religious centers in all Mesoamerica, which I don't think is true. To be honest, I think this seems false to me. And this is one very common trap. When you have extremes, that is very common in the test to have those extremes, and those are usually incorrect options. Teotihuacan was the most influential religious center. Teotihuacan was the biggest city in the world. Teotihuacan was, the most developed city in Mexico, for example. Usually those extremes are never true. So it's not D either. It is definitely going to be A, C, and E. And I'm going to give you guys one more very important tip. Most of the time, if you have enough time to do this, obviously, if you don't have enough time to do this, don't worry. But if you happen to have more time, you can maybe scan again the introductions and conclusions. Remember that I told you that when you're reading initially, you should pay special attention to the first and last paragraphs. So you have to do the same here, because most of the time, the correct choices are going to be ideas that were included in the in the first and last paragraphs. In this case, look at how here they talk about Teotihuacan having many apartment complexes, many great markets, many industrial workshops, administrative centers, religious edifices, and a great pattern of streets and buildings. Clearly, much planning and central control were involved in the expansion of the. And look at how look at how option A is exactly the same. They talk about architecture, remember the grid patterns, administration, the administrative centers, commerce, the markets, religious, all of that indicate the existence of centralized planning and control. This is from the introduction, and that's a correct choice. And it's a general choice because it talks about many things. It's not only focusing on architecture and administration. It talks about everything, right? And same thing happens with the conclusions, the last paragraphs. If you guys take a look at this, the last paragraph, remember it talked about how all of the factors kind of had a positive effect on everything, right? They had a positive feedback among all of these factors. And if you take a look at the last, at option E, if you look at option E, it basically talks about the same. It says, in many important areas, from the obsidian industry to religious tourism, Teotihuacan's success prosperity typified a classic positive feedback cycle. This is from the conclusion, this is from the introduction, right? So, and look at how general this is again, because it talks about many areas. It's not focusing on one only area like the other ones, right? That focus on religion or so forth. This talks about everything from the obsidian industry to religious tourism, including many other things. Okay, guys, so those are going to be the best tips that I can give you, but most importantly, don't waste time reading, rereading, or just spending a lot of time in this question because it's not worth it. Okay, guys? Do you have any questions now before we go?
Miss, what is the meaning of this question is worth 2 points? It's like you have to, it gets you, it gives you 2 points, or it like a score, or what?
Yes. The way that they evaluate the reading section is not like on a scale of 1 to 30. What they do is every question is worth 1 raw point. You have 9 questions, and this is the 10th question. And the 10th question is worth 2 raw points. So in total, one passage is worth 11 points. And the other passage is also worth 11 points. So it's a total of 22 points. And that is then converted to 1 to 30. Now, this question is worth like 2 of the other questions. So answering this question correctly, answering the 3 of them correctly, will get you, would be like answering 2 other questions correctly. Now, if you guys get 2 out of 3, so let's say that you chose option A, option C, and option D, so you have 2 correct, 1 incorrect, you only get 1 point. And if you answer only 1 correct, you get 0 points, you don't get any. And if you answer the 3 of them correct, then you get your total 2 points. So it is worth like 2 of the other questions if you answer the 3 of them correct.
Okay, thanks, Miss.
Yes. Any other question? Before we go. Guys, so please, as you go, don't forget today's survey, and I will see you all tomorrow. We'll be practicing the reading, so stay tuned.
I mean,
Bye-bye, guys. Take care. Thanks.
Thank you, miss.
Bye.